Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I don't know
We
what
have
to do,
a
Scott, but
quorum
we're all
of
here,
members
so.
of each municipality in attendance.
Oh, okay, there's another whole screen. Well, okay, now we're getting there.
There are 58 of us according to participants.
Oh, geez. Let's call the meeting to order. The March 22nd video conference of the general forum to order.
Yeah, I can hear.
Scott, you want to do roll call? Have you done that
Been
already?
checking in, yeah. I will just note a couple of things. The meeting procedures slide that everyone saw as they were coming in is in lieu of the script that I typically do at the beginning. We'll probably be looking for feedback during Eric's executive director report later on. But just to note a couple of quick things, public comment that have been submitted in advance of the meeting on particular agenda items have been placed in the SharePoint agenda packet folder. And I'll put a link in the group chat here in a second to where that is. And there are a number of people on the meeting that are going to wish to speak to specific agenda items as we work through those. And I encourage those people to use the electronic raise hand feature when they're recognized at the appropriate time. But other than that, I have not received any public comment, but
Okay.
there are several people on it now.
Okay. I see no raised hands. Oh, Mr.
There is.
Mr. Mullins waving over there. So, Kevin?
Thank you. My name is Kevin Mullen. I'm a homeowner in Patton Township. My concern is the UAJA wastewater utility. They overbilled me by $2,000 in 5 of the last 6 years. They forced me to pay twice as much as all of you pay. I come here every month because your townships established the UAJA decades ago, and your UAJA representatives forced me to pay twice as much as everyone else. And I want to talk to your township UAJA representatives. They can contact me through my site or any way if you have my phone number. My website is statecollegereport.com, and I plan to sue the UAJA board, 10 members, this fall in 5 months if this does not get resolved. And I noticed that later on tonight, you're going to pass a resolution against bias and hate. I think the UAJA is biased against me. They won't talk to me. Your UAJA representatives have refused to talk to me for 10 years. I mean, for 6 years. For 6 years. I want them to talk to me and tell me why they overbill me twice as much as everyone else. My website is statecollegereport.com. Anyone can contact me at that site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. We have approval of February 22nd minutes. Can I have a motion to, oh, I see David Stone wants to comment? Are you doing that later on?
Well, no, this is David Stone. Can you hear me?
Are you commenting about?
No, I just want to ask the question, just to confirm. There was some confusion over the agenda item tonight, and we actually see it as very narrow at this point. And I just want to confirm that we'll be able to make our comments during that item.
You will.
On the Whitehall Park.
You will.
Thank you.
Elliot, you have a hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to thank anyone who contributed to the fine gift I got at the beginning of the year for being chair last year, including this railroad hat. That is not my model train set in the background. That's a picture of Horseshoe Curve last fall. But in any case, I'd like to thank everybody. It was very much appreciated.
Did we buy you a ticket for a train ride too somewhere, Elliot?
One-way trip out of town, is that what it was?
No comment. Thank you. Anyone else who will raise hand?
Let you get back on track.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just from the chat, State College Borough Council person Bering is on the phone. Just wanted to make you aware. I'm not sure how she may have to unmute and ask to speak on any given matter. Just wanted to make you aware.
Okay, back to the minutes. February 22nd minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
You must speak.
This is Laura. I move to approve the February 22nd, 2021 General Forum meeting minutes.
Have a second.
Peter
Second.
Marshall, second.
Okay. Comment, discussion. Not hearing any. All in favor signify by saying aye or wave your hand. Aye.
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 Thank you. Next is introductions. Is Mr. Beamer on?
I am, Denny. I'm
Oh.
here.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Good
there you are.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to put a link in the chat, and most of you have probably already read a little bit about the announcement of Miss Sarah Thorndike, but just for the purposes of folks at home, I'll share a little bit about her. She is our new Senior Vice President for Finance and Business, and she comes to Penn State from East Carolina University, where she served as Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance and Chief Financial Officer. She led a division of more than 1,000 staff across 13 units and a budget of over $900 million. So right now at Penn State, of course, Sarah oversees the Penn State Finance and Business Office units, and that includes a number of different units as well. Sarah brings to this position more than 20 years of finance and accounting experience, including 15 years of experience leading financial operations for institutions of higher education. And as she mentioned, she also has lived in the Midwest and Ohio as well. So welcome, Sarah, to the Center Region and to the COG General Forum.
So much, Sharima. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm grateful to meet everybody on Zoom and hope to get to meet people face to face sometime in the near term. It's great to be here with you. I've been in State College now for about 2 months, and it's a beautiful place. I'm happy to be here, and I'm really happy that it's warmer and more sunny now too.
Me too.
Oh, good. You lived through a nice winter up here, so welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if we could take a moment, I'd like to call on Fire Director Steve Baer to make a kind of an unscheduled recognition based on some fine efforts of police and fire and other municipal personnel during the fire last Friday. So Steve, if you could share some recognition, please.
Thank you, Eric, and good evening all. I'm going to keep this very, very brief. I put this in writing formally. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that on Thursday afternoon, we had experienced a very serious structure fire in State College Borough, Crabapple Court. There were a number of injuries. Among those injuries, most particularly, were 5 police officers and a Borough Public Works employee, all of whom have been treated and released shortly after the fire. The reason I really wanted to just make sure that everyone was aware of this situation was the fact that, you know, a lot of times we wonder what kind of people we have who work in government, particularly here in local government. And I don't want there to be no mistake that when you have that kind of a situation where police officers and public works employees are entering a rapidly moving, rapidly developing structure fire to rescue the occupant of the dwelling, I think that stands as a great testament to the quality of people that we have here in this community, and most particularly that work for this community. And so I just wanted to make sure we made sure you were all aware of that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Would you kindly pass our thanks to those individuals, Steve? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Work from home policy is Eric and Becca. There's Becca.
Good evening. Hi, Denny.
Hi.
I'm going to take this one, Eric.
Go right ahead, Becca. Thank you.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I want to start by providing just a brief background of how we ended up with the work from home policy that's before you this evening. In 2020, we conducted a staff survey. We wanted to see in general, how the COG staff were feeling about our overall response to the pandemic. And we wanted to engage how our employees were doing throughout the shutdown and in their work from home environments. So through that survey, we learned that a majority of our staff would like the opportunity to continue to work from home in some capacity, even after the pandemic ends. We started researching this option by checking to see what the Center Region municipalities were offering to their staff, and both the State College Borough and Ferguson Township were able to share their remote work policies with us. So they were on two opposite ends of the spectrum. State College Borough policy was for emergency situations like the pandemic only, and Ferguson policy offered their staff the ability to work from home anytime that they wanted to apply to do so, as long as the nature of their position allowed the ability for that. So the policy that we've developed is a bit of a hybrid, and we think it takes into consideration what we heard from our employees during that survey, but also the needs of the organization as a public service provider. The policy has been developed and reviewed by the COG management staff and the HR committee and by our labor attorney. We do work with a labor attorney out of the Pittsburgh area through our PALRAS membership, and they specialize in employment and labor law to undertake those kind of tasks for us. So the suggestions that were made by our legal counsel are outlined in your tonight's agenda packet, and we felt that those edits made the policy overall a better, stronger document. So lastly, I just want to note that COG has been very flexible with employees and their personal situations throughout the pandemic. And we do understand that the pandemic is ongoing. So we're going to continue to use our best discretion with individual employees and their situations and needs. However, we wanted a work from home policy that we could put into place even after the pandemic is behind us. So tonight we're asking General Forum to consider adoption of the work from home policy. And Eric and I would be happy to address any questions that you may have.
You want to say anything about the work from home agreement, the 2-page attachment, and then the final home safety checklist? Is there anything in there we need to look at?
Well, not directly that I want to speak to. We're just asking for adoption on the policy,
Okay.
So that we can make tweaks if needed to the agreement and the checklist as we go along.
Okay. I assume we have read the motion. I would entertain a motion to accept what's in the packet on page 4. Someone make, Elliot? Elliot made the motion. I have a second.
Second.
Okay, Laura, second. Now we have discussion. Anyone want to begin discussion on that? Is there any discussion on that?
I see Frank's hand.
Frank's waving.
Okay.
Yeah, just more of a question than a comment. On as I read through this, when I got down to the part where it said that somebody would look at the house and make sure there's safe working conditions, successfully and safely work from home. I guess my I don't know if it's a concern or a question there would be how much are we going to be on the hook, I guess it is, for OSHA requirements? Because, if we're going to say that your house has to be safe for a workplace, we're also under OSHA, and that there's a lot there that's entailed in there that most people would not look at in their home. So that concerns me. If we're going to, authorize this as a valid workplace, where is that going to fill into OSHA? And who's going to be responsible to make sure that happens and stays that way and doesn't get, out of that spec? So that concerns me more than anything on this is what are we going to be open liable for from a safety standpoint? That's my question or comment.
Back to Eric, reply.
Well,
at this point, the safety checklist is designed to be a self-certifying checklist, and that's noted at the top. We really view this as a collaborative partnership. If this were to be something where we were hiring somebody to work from home exclusively, I think we would have much more interest in inspecting the workplace and making sure that ergonomics and other things were taken care of. And at this point, with the workers' comp, Becca's much more of an expert on that. She has looked into it and talked to our attorney about this. So I'll turn it over to Becca to respond to that part of it.
Yeah, I did reach out to our workers' comp and ask them when we wrote the policy what the rules on that would be, and really they would be investigating any injuries that occur the same as they would as if they happened in the workplace. And it really, if an employee was acting on behalf of COG when the injury occurred, then that would be considered a workers' comp claim and treated as such.
Thank you.
And I understand that part, Danny, just to come back on it. I understand that part, but my question is, let's take just a simple thing. Let's say that somebody, and by OSHA rule, there should have been a handrail or something to grab onto, and that doesn't happen. Are we liable for that? That's my question.
It's a good question. I don't have an answer to that question, Frank.
Is that something Eric can look into with respect to home safety conditions? I mean,
we can certainly look into that. The situations that Becca's talked about and we've talked about with our agency directors were mainly about things that could be controlled related to the workplace. Was it something where they were acting in their capacity as an employee at the time versus did they trip over the cat, for example, and have an injury? So, we're just getting some feedback. I think Lou Brungard might be able to chime in. He has some workplace experience with OSHA, and Lou, if you're able to join us, maybe you could.
Sure. Good evening, everyone.
Thanks, Lou.
So Danny, I think, one thing that has to be considered, OSHA 1910, the general safety standards, how they apply, where they apply, handrails, things like that could also fall under ADA. But again, the home workplace isn't going to be intended for public access and meetings. So I think that the general safety standards we would assess, but again, the self-reporting, self-certification is a common tool right now that allows us to press on and continue on. But I think your point's very well taken.
Peter,
I would suggest that we pass this contingent on the approval of the solicitor.
okay. We have a motion and a second, so if we're ready to vote on that. All in favor of that motion?
Mr. Chair, yeah.
Yes, Rich.
The only thing I think in this case, we'd want to use the PELRAS
Yes,
asset,
yes.
and it is two separate. The policy is one thing, the implementation of it is another. I think we're all supportive of the policy. The implementation, per Mr. Harden's notes, is where we just need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves. And I think PELRAS and our insurance carrier, or working with the borough risk management, would get us there.
Okay.
And we're happy to have a final review. We did get a lot of good feedback from the PELRAS attorney, and we can also get feedback from Terry as well. But we appreciate the support that we're hearing from our elected officials for the policy and the safety of our employees. So we'll complete that review and implement it, assuming it's passed. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I hear no opposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Page 4. Eric, resolution 2021-3.
Thank you very much. As we've all been reading quite a bit in the news lately, we, I think, are all very dismayed about the violence and acts of hate and discrimination against people of color, as well as, in particular, Asians, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders. And a year ago, the COG passed a resolution condemning such violence and bias and hate. And it has been recommended and suggested that we pass this again tonight. Councilmember Yapel from the borough brought this to our attention, and that was also advocated for by Jesse Barlow. So perhaps the two of them might want to comment before we go further.
I'll entertain a motion to accept that. We'll do a second and then entertain comments from the community. We have a motion to.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We now have comment.
Mr. Chair, who was the second from?
Teresa Wafer.
Both
yeah.
from the borough.
Right.
No, the motion came from Elliot.
Motion came from Elliot.
I thought it
was
came
Evan.
from
I'm
Evan.
sorry.
I apologize.
Okay. We had several people from the community wanting to comment. Mr. Hahn was one. And is Don on? I thought I saw his name.
Yes.
There you are.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi. Yes, my name is Don Hahn. I guess I'm a former borough council member, former mayor, current judge, currently also a member of the Governor's Advisory Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs. I want to thank the executive committee for forwarding this resolution to the agenda, and I certainly urge you to the general forum to vote yes on it. As a Korean American who was born here in Center County and grew up in State College, I actually believe that I mean, it's been my experience that State College has been a rather safe place, but it certainly isn't one that was free from fear. One of the, I think one of the potentially insidious results of the events of the past week has been to create a chilling effect upon those who live here, those who may wish to live here, potential students, potential professors, and once again, my experience here has been free from violence, but on the other hand, I think that not always free from fear. I think that it is that passing this resolution is an excellent sign. Not only to our community here and some sub communities, but also to the global community, to basically indicate that it's that the local governments here are taking a stand in favor of being welcoming to diverse communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. There was one other individual this afternoon that Pat wanted to speak, and I don't have that name. Scott? Oh, there, up in the, okay. I see, yellow hand.
Are you referring to me? I know I had written to Scott. Or
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So my name is Nalini Krishnankuti. I'm a resident of State College. And I too, like Judge Hahn, serve on the Governor's Advisory Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs. And I really want to thank both State College Borough for having passed a resolution, but the Center Region Council of Governments for considering the resolution today to condemn acts of bias and hate in our community. And as it was noted, it's very relevant for the AAPI community right now, both with the uptick in hate as well as the recent shootings and deaths in Atlanta. Yesterday, I was at the vigil organized by the APIDA caucus on Penn State, and I heard both students as well as community members talking about the impact of the increase in hate on them. They also expressed how invisible and vulnerable they were feeling. And it was a really great feeling to see, the community come out, people of all groups coming out and standing in solidarity with them. I just wanted to tell you that right now it is, we use the word Asian, but it's not all Asian community members impacted equally the same time. After 9/11, it was those of us who were more from South Asia, brown skin, from Pakistan and India and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh that were impacted. And right now, it's this other whole group of people who are from the Far East and who are from Southeast Asia, ranging in country. If I start telling the names of the countries, I mean, there are many and I'll miss some, but I'll try. From Myanmar and Thailand and Vietnam and Korea and Japan and Singapore and Malaysia and Thailand and Philippines and Laos and Vietnam and Cambodia and many more that are impacted. And we just use this word Asian, but behind that moniker is this whole group of communities that are impacted. Now, this is really, really important to our region. Asian Americans happen to be the largest underrepresented group in many of our local communities. We are about 9% in Patton. I'm mentioning the top three, 9% in Patton, about 11% in State College, and about 15% in Ferguson Township. At Penn State, we are about 6% of the student population just in general, but in many, many graduate departments, from engineering to statistics to economics and more, I want to say we are, 70 to 80%. When I say we are, I'm talking about the AAPI community, 70 to 80% of the graduate student population. So there is this community that's really, really vulnerable. And in the Governor's Commission right now, I'm heading an effort to get us to mark Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And what was really interesting, I started my outreach in January. And what I found out, and this is an effort we are doing statewide because of the coronavirus, we can do virtual events and this can be seen everywhere. And what was really interesting is when I started my outreach in January, I found that most people did not have any plans for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And it was not because January was too early to begin planning for me. It was because people just did not have plans for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Given all that's happened in our country, I think this May is a really, really unique opportunity for all of us. About all of us who are Americans, we really should be having understanding and learning our history all year round. But sometimes February comes around and we have an opportunity, and May comes around and we have another opportunity. And while these opportunities should continue year round, I truly believe this May is a unique opportunity for all of us to amplify, study, and elevate the experience of Asian Americans. So I know that we've approached some of our local government to issue, to issue proclamations. And I know that people have been responsive. And I would just urge all of you, and that's just like the bare minimum, but I'd urge all of you in your workplaces, in places of influence, any place, to see how you can elevate these stories. What can we do in May and moving forward? But with that, I want to just thank all of you for considering adoption of this resolution. I think an act of bias or hate against any one person in our community is an act against all of us. I thank you for this, and just thank you. Thank you for doing this today.
I see a raised hand by Teresa. Teresa?
Yeah, I very much back the proclamation and the need for it. And I extend my sympathy to the families involved in this particular tragedy. It is the fact that I have to say this particular tragedy. There's another one going on in Colorado right now. I don't know what it is and I don't know why it is, but I do know there was at least one gunman. It is continuing. I would like to take Nalini and Vicky Fong's suggestion. Vic suggested that we really should be celebrating Asian New Year, Chinese New Year. And there are several other groups who have it within weeks because of the time of the year. I think it's something that we as a borough and we as COG should make part of our annual. There are New Year's about, I don't know, 8 times a year, different groups. And we celebrate them both the same and differently, largely with foods and maybe small parades or some other such thing, often religious ceremonies as well. I think we should make them part of our plans over the next few years as we decide what things to celebrate and use our parks for and things like that. I would also like to say that it's not enough. As a historian, I know people never learn about other people's histories unless they want to. And most people just want to get through the classes and move on. So we can put these things out and we can enjoy them. But until we can lessen gun violence and hatred and anger, we hit a wall. So I think our job as members of local governments is to work to force change in our laws. And we know, because we've tried, that it's difficult and sometimes impossible, and we have to stop saying it's impossible and we give up. Each of us as elected officials has to stand up and say, gun control helps stop violence, period. So I very much back our statement and our backing of the people whose losses are so very heavy. And then we need to work to try to stop them. We can't just keep giving sympathy and words. We need to at least work on making actions to change things. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Others? Oh, I see no other hands, Scott, right?
See any others?
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a motion and second to accept the motion as stated on page 4. All in favor of that, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Not hearing any. Thank you. Okay. Item 7, recommendation to retain Concord Public Financial Advisors, Joe and Eric.
Good evening. Eric, is it okay if I take this one?
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. So on pages 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the agenda, we've tried to lay out what has been done over the course of the last few months, from the Zoom and Learn in September to some of the municipal conversations that would occurred last fall, and into the Finance Committee's actions beginning this year. So in January, the Finance Committee set a special Finance Committee meeting in early February and had a second Finance Committee meeting at the regular scheduled time on February 11th. At that Finance Committee meeting and endorsed by the Executive Committee, Mr. Chris Gibbons was hired to bring back information and options regarding the refinancing of the loan and how to move forward. So within that, on page 6 and 7 are the various options associated with what was brought back to the Finance Committee at its March meeting. And these are options run the gamut from refinancing just the pools loan, which is not recommended, to a joint refinancing and refunding back to municipalities for both loans, through to refinancing and adding money to the projects. These various items and the work that was done by staff is especially focused on attachments 07A, which is the presentation to the general forum last fall, 07B, which is a reconciliation between the project costs from the bids that were received last fall at the direction of the general forum, and the amount of funds currently available. 07C, which would be the refinancing of the pools loan only. 07D, which is a refinancing and returning of the funds to the municipalities for both the pools and the parks loan. And 07E, which would be the refinancing of both the pools and the parks loan, and then various options in terms of capital infusion into the Whitehall Road Regional Park project. So this was discussed at the Finance Committee and referred to the Executive Committee. And the Executive Committee at their meeting passed the following recommendation to the General Forum to consider for tonight. And that recommendation is that the Executive Committee recommends that the General Forum review and retain Concord Public Financial Advisors to investigate the various options as presented to the Finance Committee at its March 11th, 2021 meeting, which considers the various refinancing options associated with the pools and regional parks loans for the purpose of developing a consensus position of the General Forum for Concord Public Financial Advisors to seek to finalize borrowing to complete the Whitehall Road Regional Park project. Now, at this point in time, my final statement within here before passing it back over would be, we seem to have unanimous agreement that we should refinance this debt and save money. The question is not, should we do it, that I've heard. The question is how should we do it? And that's where agreement does not seem to have been reached at this point. And at this point, I will turn it back over to either Mr. Norberg or Mr. Hammeister and continue going on from there.
Any intro comments before I ask for a motion to accept what's on page 7, Eric?
Well, as discussed in the executive session, as Joe outlined, there are several different scenarios, and there's some competing perspectives as to whether option 1 or option 4 or somewhere in between is going to be the right option. And one of the topics that was discussed during the executive committee meeting was the possibility of asking Concord Financial Advisors to model 2 different scenarios. And as a result of that question at the executive committee meeting, we did find out that if we did choose 2 of the options to be pursued, it would not cost any more than choosing one in particular. And Joe can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but if we were to proceed in that way, it would be ideal for the discussion tonight to wrap around which option it is. As Joe indicated, there seems to be consensus that we should refinance, and that would be at the very base option 1, but what would be the other option? And if so, we would appreciate some discussion and motions on that. Also in your packet is information on unit voting and how we will do unit voting tonight. If that's the course where we end up to cast votes for the motion regarding finance or regarding retaining Concord Financial Advisors. And so Scott has outlined how we will prepare for and do unit voting using Zoom, and that would be to have all of the elected officials for each community, along with the community's municipal manager, go into a Zoom breakout room and have time to reach consensus on their unit vote. Any member of the public who wants to be able to observe one of those breakout rooms or more, if they want to bounce back and forth, needs to signal to Scott to be added to that breakout room after the elected officials have been transferred to the breakout room. Based on the policy that was adopted by the COG 2 years ago in 2019, all public comment needs to take place before the elected officials move into the breakout rooms. There's not to be additional public comment and dialogue with residents in the breakout rooms for the purpose or prior to arriving at the vote. So hopefully that lays out a couple of the parameters of where we are now and where we need to go tonight, please.
Well, what we do now is, will someone move the motion so we can go into discussion? Because if we don't do the motion, we're not going anywhere. So I have a motion by someone to accept. Mr. Elliott Abrams. Motion, second?
Second. Evan Meyer.
Second by Evans, okay. Now we have discussion. We have a yellow hand. We'll start with Evan up in the corner and then Laura move across the top. Evan?
Thanks, Danny. Just to review a couple things. One, the motion that Elliot moved and I seconded does not specifically say, I want to make sure that's the intent, does not specifically indicate what option is being recommended. The understanding from what Eric said and from what I'm reading in front of me is that in fact, we are asking that Concord Public Financial Advisors take a look at basically all these options and present us with what they see. And then we, at a later time, we have to make a decision. Now that brings some problems forward. One, as chair of the COG Finance Committee, we had a fairly extensive discussion about all the different options in our last meeting. And the longer we wait to take action, the potential exists for interest rates to rise, although the Fed has indicated right after the last meeting, I believe last week, that they don't intend to raise interest rates over the near term next several months. Of course, that could change. Anything could change, but that's what they said. But we have in front of us basically 8 different things to consider. The Finance Committee itself recommended number 4. But again, I would like clarification. Maybe Eric can clarify this. That what's before us is not because you asked us to discuss this, but the motion is not about any of these options. It's just a general motion asking Concord to look into these things.
Correct. The referral from the executive committee did not come to agreement on the particular option as you articulated, Mr. Myers. And what the finance committee had recommended was option 4. And so ideally, before adjourning to discuss a unit vote, there would be a recommendation, either an amendment to the motion or a substitute motion that would identify 1 or 2 to be modeled by Concord, not all 7 or 8.
I see Laura next with the yellow hand. Laura?
Thank you. I actually, I was hoping that we could have questions, as it seems Evan is going in that direction, before we kind of open it up to actual discussion. I also have some questions.
We're opening it up to the committee later after
Okay.
After people get done.
Right. So questions that I have relates to some confusion that I've been trying to work out. And I thought I had it worked out, but then there seems to be some ambiguity. So Evan mentioned 8 options. And indeed, on page 6 and 7, there are 8 options. But the Finance Committee recommendation also included another option that I believe is found in attachment 7D. And that option is to refinance only and return the money to the municipalities. So the way the agenda is written and the motion that was put forward is that we are including that because that was in bullet number 1 of what the Finance Committee looked at. So my understanding is right now, just trying to put brackets around the discussion right now. Right now, what's being discussed are the potential to include any of the 8 options found on pages 6 and 7 of the agenda, and the option that's found in attachment 7D, which is the refinance only and return to municipalities. Now, what I don't know is if for our purposes of what we're doing, sending this to Chris Gibbons, if option found in 7D, again, refinance and return to municipalities, is identical for his purposes to option 1, which is refinance only and return money to parks. So if somebody could answer that, that is my first question. And then I just have 2 more. Joe, looks like you have your hand up.
Oh,
answer my question, maybe.
Yes, number 1 in the agenda actually references 07D, But when you're
Okay.
saying the present value of savings, you have an option off of number one. That would either be to put it back in the park or return it to the municipalities. So you could say which direction do you want to go within there. So theoretically, there probably should be a 1A and a 1B, which 1A is returning it to the municipalities and 1B is putting it back into the project. So when you
Okay.
look at attachment 07E, each one of those options, 7 options on 07E, has money going back into the park.
Okay.
07D has money in the same amount as option 1, but instead of it going into the park, it goes back to the municipalities.
Okay, so
And-
for the purposes of this discussion, when we're discussing options 1 through 8, we can discuss option 1 as having a part A and a part B. Part A would be return the money to the municipalities, and then part B would be return the money to the park. Is that what I understand?
It would be a decision point, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Okay,
then I
thank you.
have
One more? Okay, go ahead.
just 2 other questions.
Okay.
One, what is the timeline for the decision for borrowing? And the other question is, when do the bids that are currently out there and bid upon expire?
Thursday.
For the first part of that with the timeline for the borrowing, I can answer that one, Denny, if that's okay.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so what we're looking for tonight is direction in terms of where Mr. Gibbons is going to go to the market. So how are we writing the RFP to the banks so the banks can bid on refinancing this? Are we refinancing it as the finance committee recommended initially under option 4 in that dollar amount, or are we doing it as a straight refinance or somewhere in between? We've got to narrow these down into 1 or 2 different directions in which we could possibly agree on, so we can go to market with an RFP for the acceptance of the whichever ones we're doing, the bank loan. That would be unanimous vote at the May general forum is what we're targeting right now with the information coming back from May Finance Committee. But to retain Mr. Gibbons would be a majority vote tonight, but that would be done with the knowledge that you need a unanimous vote in 2 months.
Right, okay. Laura, is that it?
Just when do the bids expire was the other
Oh,
question.
okay. I think Pam or Eric, Pam, you have that answer?
Yes, the bids expire on the 30th. So the action we're asking for, as Joe outlined, it would be very important for direction to be given tonight regarding option 1A or B, as Joe noted. If option 1 is chosen and there would be approximately $400,000 that would be available to come back either to the project or to the municipalities, we would need to have that information voted on by the general forum tonight. That would help the Parks and Rec Authority make decisions about next steps.
I'm sorry, that leads me to a follow-up question. So the general forum also has to unanimously approve all construction contracts. So that,
No.
so that's what our articles, our agreement says in the planning and development of the regional parks.
Except that subsequent to that agreement, the COG and Ferguson leased the property to the Parks and Recreation Authority, and so the development is the responsibility of Center Region Parks and Recreation Authority.
In that agreement is where is found that we have to unanimously vote on all loans.
Does not.
Except that was transferred via the lease.
Okay, so, all right.
Laura looks puzzled. We'll go with Miss. Okay, I got Rich on the yellow hand, and then Steve. And Janet next. Rich?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm the document that Laura's referencing is the Articles of Agreement for the regional parks. And in that document, it does contain a clause about construction contracts. However, as Mr. Nornberg has indicated, following that, a lease was executed, which a lease requires the unanimous vote of the general forum, to delegate that authority to the authority to develop the parks.
Okay. I see Mr. Miller next, Bruce after that, and Janet after that. Steve?
Yeah, I would like to go back to the original question about option one, returning money to the parks. I think the way it's shown on the 7E, that it doesn't do that because we can't both decrease the municipal payments to 8.2 million and return money to the parks. If we borrow exactly what we owe right now, we have to continue paying what we would have been paying otherwise, or else the money is not, there's no money available, it seems to me. So if we follow what's in option one and that repayment schedule, I don't see where there's any money available to increase
Right.
the amount for the parks.
That's right.
Okay, Bruce, next hand up, and then Janet.
At this point, I want some clarification. The general forum obligates the money that the authority borrows. Excuse me. Does the authority have to follow the general forum's recommendation as far as putting the money into the project, referring it to back, or returning it back to municipalities? Or does the authority have the ability to make that decision themselves, irrespective of what we might vote upon today?
This is an Eric or Joe question, it sounds like. Joe, go ahead.
Let me make sure I understood the question correctly. You're asking whether who has the authority to designate the use of the proceeds savings of the refinancing, correct?
Yes.
My feeling is that that's a question for the general forum to determine when they make the decision regarding the refinancing, because they'll give the financial resources to the authority to complete the project. So if there's savings to be put back into the project, that should be a decision made tonight, please.
Okay.
That's not clear to me.
I disagree. I disagree that we have any direction whatsoever.
I think within the refinancing, the municipalities have to guarantee the debt through their tax base. So by doing that, the municipalities would have the ability to say, this is the direction we're going within the unit debt, within our debt usage.
A cause and effect there.
Teresa, let me go to Janet, because Janet was up next, and then you. Janet? Please.
Yes, I have a question. I was initially under the impression that we were simply going to decide whether Mr. Gibbons and Concord were going to go take the ball and run with it and tell us what they found out when they did an analysis. But it seems to me we have to determine also which options they're going to look at, because they can't look at all 8 of them. So shouldn't that be part of the decision that we're voting on?
Yes, please.
So for example, option 1 and option 4.
Correct.
As I understand it, they're willing to do 2.
That is correct.
So we should be specifying, once we tell Mr. Gibbons that we want him to do it, which options we want him to look at, right?
And that was where I attempted to with my statement earlier, Janet, was we're in agreement that we should do something, but we're not in agreement on what we should do. How we should refinance. We're in agreement that we should refinance. We're not in agreement with how we should refinance. And that was option 1 versus option 4.
Right. But we would have him look at both of them. Therefore, we should specify that when we say yay or nay.
And then he can draft an RFP off of there.
Thank you.
Okay, keep Teresa, you're next, and then we'll go back to Laura on the top screen and move across. Teresa?
Okay, well, I agree with Laura's comment there. Not in terms of whether we okay Chris's doing this job for us. And obviously we do need to be specific if he's looking at all those options or only some of them. Because every time somebody says something, they disagree with the last person. Yes, we're going to do all of them. No, we're only going to do numbers 1 and 4. I don't actually care which numbers we do. I do care whether or not he thinks they are economically and financially feasible, and if so, why or why not. That said, I have a very big problem with the earlier statement. One of the problems that we have had in the past is that we have okayed money, and this department, Parks and Rec, has been just plain reckless with it. On one occasion, borderline illegal with signing things. I'm not comfortable with their signing contracts. We are the people who were elected and appointed to make those decisions. We can't hand that off to employees, and we shouldn't. We're liable if they make mistakes. Each of us and all of us. But more to the point, this particular project, and I was here for something fairly close to the beginning of it, has morphed into something completely different. I will not spend a penny more if it includes 500 parking places, great big lights, and team playing for people who can build their own private places on the other side of the county, which they're doing. This is supposed to be a regional park for our families and children, friends coming to visit. This is not supposed to be a sports venue for people from across the country. I had a competitive skater for a daughter. I understand what that takes. I understand the travel and the investment and the need for really good venues. This should not be one of them. I will not vote to pay for this to become a public venue for any sport whatsoever. When we started this, it was the tennis people wanted a building built. Now, we have absolutely no restrooms, and we are still sitting immediately above two of the most important watersheds in this community. 500 parking places? I'm sorry. Ferguson's going to find themselves using some well out in the far side of Marengo if they're lucky. And I mean that on the literal sense, unfortunately. No, we need to be in charge of what this is going to be spent on. Mr. Gibbons has to tell us what's financially reasonable for us as an organization to take out as a loan. But if in fact we cannot repeal the rights of employees to make final decisions on how we spend this and which phase gets done in which order, then I vote nothing, $0 more. I put my neck out 14 years ago. I said, yes, it's a very expensive and we should do it. Well, we have none of what we wanted, absolutely, positively zero. We have thousands of students who are going to use every inch of this park, and they have the legal right. They will be residents, but they will not be paying taxes to help support it. And now we want to bring in kids from I don't care where to have special fields that we have to level. That's a travesty. 100%. The only thing worse is that pile of twigs next door that we have 10,000 students living in. And wait till they start to crumble. So
let's move on, Teresa.
So anyway, I just want to say that I have no problem voting yes. I want to know exactly what we're voting for. Is he doing 2 possible things or is he looking at 8? And when it comes back, I want to know that we make the decisions as to where the money is spent. Nobody who is staff should be making that final decision.
Okay, go across the top. I got Laura on the far left. Laura, and then Richard and Steve and Catherine.
Thanks. Thank you.
Bruce
Thank you.
too, so, okay. Right.
Okay, so I haven't even gotten to the point of where I'm making some statements about the park itself. And I agree with a fair amount of what Teresa said, and I have a bit of a statement prepared. But prior to that, I still have questions and a lot of confusion, not only about the process tonight, but I will tell you that I have sent multiple emails to multiple individuals in positions of power that could have responded to me prior to tonight about their thought that this so-called lease document supplants the document that Ferguson Township had signed prior to that. And I in no way agree with that analysis. So I would like to see the solicitor's opinion about that. And I really do not feel comfortable with this general forum moving forward at all until we all understand the nature of these agreements and how they work together. This is very, very rocky ground, shifting sand that we're all standing on, and it shifts different ways at different times. It's completely inappropriate. Next, I want to speak to something perhaps I heard incorrectly, and I'd like to get some clarity on it. What I think I heard earlier in this meeting is that the electeds have some sort of direction over the additional borrowing when it happens. And I will lift up Teresa's concern about this. We are going to be told tonight, perhaps, that we have direction over that and then have an agreement put in our face the next time when we're concerned about the amenities that are being chose to be lifted up. I just don't know. I feel like there's an awful lot of confusion on this that needs to be worked out. So correct me if I misheard. Did I hear that we as elected officials have any control whatsoever over where the money is directed to once we do the borrowing? Do we have any control whatsoever as the agreements stand today?
Joe or Eric, respond first.
I will take that one, Eric, and you can go forward. When we have a new loan documents, the new loan documents are fresh. They're rewritten. So over the Fulton Bank loan that we currently have for the regional parks, it's already been given to do this way with the parks. This is what you've told them to do. If we refinance and refund that loan, you can, within those documents, adjust what is going on. People have asked, can we borrow money for, something else associated within there? Yes, you can within there. That's part of the reason why we went to $9 million, $10 million, $10.5 million is we could have capitally infused other projects as well. So this is what I've been saying since the beginning. You have a blank slate. Make a decision on the projects, and the loan will do what you want it to do in terms of the projects and financing those projects. Now, if you don't put those restrictions, or the authority isn't able to follow those restrictions, then maybe the refinancing doesn't go through, and maybe we stick with the Fulton Bank loan or do something different. It's a blank slate on the financing. The financing needs to follow decisions on the project.
One follow-up to that answer. So what you're saying is, if we select option 1B and say put the money back into the park, and we stipulate that some of that money absolutely must be used for restrooms in the loan document, that is indeed what the authority must absolutely do with those dollars. They must prioritize those restrooms, period. Yes?
At this point in time, I think they have a decision made before that to see if those can fit within the budget. And I think that's where Lou is. I think you have that in that discussion. What does that look like? What does the park look like? What are you forfeiting to get the restrooms?
I feel like I got just two different answers right now. I'm sorry, just to finally try to work out that confusion. So if we decide to move forward with, say, option 1 and option 2, okay, I'm going to say not option 4. I'm going to just pick two different options. And we say, we'll move forward with checking out the refinancing on either of those. Can we right now stipulate that within that we're going to include restroom funding? Or does that then also come later? So we have to pick now which options we're going to choose, and then later decide how we want to allocate funding to write into the loan documents.
Good question.
My point to you is if you look at 07B, that's the financing statement. You're now telling me that option 2, selecting that one, is $700,000 of additional funds into the park. You're also telling me that it's $1.6 million of a shortfall with the restrooms included in there. So you're still talking about, even with a capital infusion of what that number is, of $700,000, $678,000, of being about $900,000 short of what this says to get that scope in there. What do? Where do you find those? Where do you find those dollars? And do you just continue on?
One final follow-up, and then I will relinquish the floor. I appreciate all the time. Well, what I would say is the authority has to change the scenario of how the funding is allocated. For example, God knows why, we are supposedly building 529 parking spaces. Those 529 parking spaces were meant to serve the entire build out of all of phase 1.
Exactly.
But now we're building a teeny tiny little subset of the actual phase 1 with all of the parking for it. So if I were an authority member, it would be kind of a no-brainer. I would not be building the excessive amount of parking for no reason whatsoever. And I would be putting that money into what they value, the playing fields and the bathroom and the playground. So, you know, what the elected officials seem to be having a trouble with is sometimes we're told we have control over what the authority builds. Sometimes we're told we're not. Now we're saying we can put a stipulation in the loan, but hey, you know what? You have to put enough money in there that the stipulation doesn't matter because they have all the money to build all the things anyway. So it's it's very confusing. Thank you for the time.
I had a hand by Rich. Did he disappear? Rich?
No.
I'll keep going, Steve, and we'll get back to Pam and Bruce and Elliot. So, Rich?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Wow. Clearly there's, after 15 years, it's amazing how much confusion there is about various things and everything. The biggest point that I think needs to be made in Ms. Lafer's discussion and everything, it seemed that she was referencing the Parks and Rec agency, which has staff, as making these decisions, and that is absolutely incorrect. The Center Region Parks and Rec Authority, which is comprised of appointees by each municipality, are the ones making those decisions. Now, the next part of it is it definitely complicates matters, and as our Mr. Lord and Mr. Bernier can probably speak much better than me on the Parks Comprehensive Study, some of the results that came out of that. The authority has the authority, but they don't have any money. And so the second piece, critical piece, is the member municipalities who comprise the authority, the representation of the authority needs to guarantee the loans of the authority. So where the disconnect is now, we've already given the authority to build a park based on the dollars that are currently available, no refinancing or anything like that. However, if we want to do any finagling with the financing, whether it be refi just for the savings or to add additional funds to complete the what is currently bid plus the restrooms and all that, or anywhere in between, that requires a unanimous vote. That requires new documents. That would be a time when stipulations like Ms. Nittany is suggesting to do so would possibly come into play. To do nothing would be an absolute disservice to the residents of the center region. We would basically be paying Fulton Bank $500,000 for nothing. Another point that I need to make on the option number 1A and option number 1B, under option 1A, what that would be, let's say A is back to the municipalities. The municipalities receive that money by reduced debt service payments over the course of the new loan, if that helps make that understood. The option 1B, what would have to happen there is it for the money, that $487,000 to continue to come to the project, the municipalities would have to continue to contribute to COG at the current level, as shown in the first column of the update summary, the existing current total debt service. Right now, if we do nothing, we're projected to pay $8.75 million. If we refi and the money comes back to the municipalities receive that via paying less over the period of time from 2021 to 2031. To put additional money into the park, that 487, we would keep our debt service at the current, but instead of paying it to Fulton Bank for nothing, we would put it into our park. And that's the goal of the option number 1. Option 2 takes it a little bit further by balancing the payments across the life of the loan. That also creates additional, it does not extend the loan past its current, either loan past its current 2031 and puts it in there. If you take it all the way to option 4, you're adding 5 quarterly payments and creating the $1.6 million. So there's options in between, you know, there's the base options and the options. Back to the point of what decision we have to make. I'm sorry, I forget who exactly said this, but the motion that is on the floor currently is totally inefficient and does not accomplish what needs to be accomplished here this evening. What has to happen out of this evening is that we need to give Mr. Gibbons direction. And I do take, it's not Mr. Gibbons' job to tell us what decision to make. We gave him parameters on, and one of the key things of the proponents was to keep the annual debt service as it is currently budgeted this year, therefore negating the need for a tax increase for additional borrowing at this time. The earliest would be in 2029. So, you know, there's many things that factor into this, but what needs to come out of it is a consensus opinion to go to Mr. Gibbons on what he's to go to the market to get. He already provided all of us this information. He provided it to the Finance Committee in the updated summary. That's what we asked him to do. He did a very good job of bringing that back. And we now have all kinds of information, maybe too much information, but it's our role at this point to whittle that down and ask him what to go to the market for. And the other thing, you know, it was Mr. Myers referenced about the Fed and everything. The Fed isn't 100%, you know, determiner of that. As someone who's currently out for a refinance now, interest rates are rising. And so the delay is going to cost us more money on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dennis?
Let's go to Steve. I'm looking for new voices. Mr. Miller,
Dennis,
Ms. April, Bruce. We'll get to all open hands. Steve, go ahead.
It's okay. I think Rich answered a lot of what I was going to say, or he said the same things. There are a couple things I do want to add, though. I think the option 1B, as Rich stated, is not feasible. And that is for us to borrow 7.4 million and pay back as we have paid, because that gets the $400,000 or $500,000 for the parks, but it's over 10 years. And we need it at the time that they're built. So option 1 really is a refinance and return the money to the municipalities. If the municipalities want to then give 500,000 up front, which I don't see happening, that's how that option would provide money for the parks. The second thing I want to say is I want to respond to something that Teresa Lather said. This park was originally intended as 10 fields. It was a design as a tournament facility. It came about when the university quit allowing local organizations to use the fields on the university. There was a decision made that we needed to provide fields some other way. So I think to say that we've gotten away from the original intention, I agree, but in a very different way. We have gotten to it being something other than what it was intended originally to be. And that may be good or bad, I don't know. We can't afford to fund what it was originally intended to be, so probably it's good. But one thing I would ask this body to do or not to do is the same thing we did 8 years ago and the same thing we did 4 years ago, which is say to the authority, here's what we want you to build. Here's how much money we have for you to use. We know it's $2 million short, but that's your problem. That's what we did 4 years ago, and that's how we got to where we are now. We didn't address at that time funding what we told the authority we wanted built. I'm just saying that we really have to avoid doing that again, or this whole thing is going to continue to be a fiasco. That's it.
Catherine April, please. John, Kevin?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm listening to this conversation. I'm gonna try not to be emotional about it. I definitely have my own feelings about what I would like to see in a park, but we came into this meeting, at least we did, our manager met with us and said that, you know, the whole point of this, the decision making is whether or not we hire Chris Gibbons, but this is much, much more than that. It's much more complex. So I just wonder if these papers are the most strategic use of language. I understand that number one, you don't increase the loan amount. I can understand that with refinancing. But for the other options where you're increasing 8 million, 9 million, 10 million, what am I going to get for that additional money? It's not clear to me. And I find this very confusing. I can't make a decision.
Okay. Let's go. Bruce was next on my list. We'll keep going around. Keep going, Bruce.
Okay, well, hello. I've got 3 bullets here in my notes. One is that we need to stop screwing around with this, make a decision, move on. We've wasted a lot of money. We've provided service on debt that we haven't done anything with for years and years and years. So it's time to make a decision, people. It's time to move forward. The second one is I think we need to ask our solicitor about the authority of the authority. I appreciate Rich's comments and Steve's comments. I think they're both on target. The Pennsylvania Authorities Act is long and lengthy, redundant, but we have authorities to provide some level of independence. So we give them direction, but then it's their job to move things forward and make decisions. That's why we have authorities. Just the same as Mr. Mullins spoke about the sewer authority, but we don't control the sewer authority. We appoint citizens to be members of the sewer authority, but then they have a certain level of autonomy. They also have the ability to raise their own money through fees. We don't. Slight difference.
Thank you.
Final thing is, I would like to move to amend the motion that we ask Mr. Gibbons to investigate options 1 and options 4. And that's a motion on my part for an amendment.
I would second that.
We have a second on that?
Yes,
the
Evan
second
Myers,
come
I
from?
second that.
Evan.
Evan Myers.
Okay, okay. Is there discussion on that motion?
Can I speak before we vote? This is Pam Robb from Patton.
Well, we're voting, we're gonna vote on the amendment.
Okay.
Is there discussion on the amendment? All in favor of accepting that amended motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposition, nay. Okay, we got the amendment finished. Let's get back to Pam Robb.
I just have a question as I'm listening, and thank you, Rich, for breaking that down for me. If I'm not mistaken, we have a finance committee. I think they've made a recommendation. Have we overlooked their decision to bring before this committee? And can somebody from the finance committee speak on this? I think because they have done their research, they have looked into this, they made a recommendation and nobody has brought up what our the financial committee for COG has said. So somebody from the committee, can I have somebody from the committee speak up on this?
Evan, you chair that group?
Yeah, certainly. As chair of the finance committee, Rich is the vice chair. I think at the beginning, when I first made some comments about asking, I did mention that the finance committee recommended by a vote of 5-1 that we recommended option number 4. That's what we recommended. Option 4, that's what we recommended onto the executive committee that we consider. So again, when we get to deciding, my understanding is we need a unanimous vote, not to do what we're doing now tonight, but when we accept one of these. But it was 4-1, and I'm satisfied as chair that we are investigating options 1 and 4. So and we'll see where that takes us and what Mr. Gibbons comes back with us with.
Continue with the raised hand. President, you're next.
Yes, thank you. So I think some of the things that I wanted to mention have been mentioned, but I would say that I am at this point in 2021, with what we know about the environment and the climate, I am against this park in its current form. So I have concerns with the 529 parking spaces. I think there should be minimal parking with, people can park in the downtown area or wherever and take public transportation. We should not encourage more paving. And I have concerns with the lighting and with the amount of light pollution that goes on and the destruction of the natural habitat around it, which is the number of trees that we'll be cutting down, flattening things, water pollution, and so on. So even though it was decided by someone, unanimous consent of the townships, at this point, I would not be voting for adding money to this project. The other thing is what I think Councilwoman Yipple mentioned. When I go to buy a car, I get a price tag and I get what I'm getting for that price, for that option. And I look at those and I design. In this case, what I've been told is that we are voting on just the amount of money that we are going to allocate. And we do not know what are we getting with that money. And that is a problem for me as a municipal, servant, a steward for people's money. I cannot just sign a check without any authority of what we'll be doing. Those should go together hand in hand. And the third point is that if everyone agrees on
on refinancing and thinks that that's a good idea, instead of letting the banks take the 500K, we should possibly do that. And the other thing that I found out was that all construction contracts have to be approved by all the townships before it can be done. And if that is true, that is the power that perhaps the township should use to make sure that what they want is done in this park. So those are my comments. Thanks.
We have 4 more hands up. Laura will start on the left and work over. Laura, Rich, Elliot, and Teresa.
Okay, I think
Well-
Elliot had his hand up before me, though.
Okay, that's fine. Elliot?
Hi. We're seeing why I voted against the establishment of an authority more than a dozen years ago, because once you give the power to the authority, they are supposed to do the work. We have a man coming to our meetings every month because he's upset with the sewer authority, and yet we have no say over it. We appoint people to advise it, and we may do funding, but that's where our things stop. So unless we're going to dissolve the authority and give it back to the Parks and Recreation Committee, then we've got an authority. And now the question is, in my mind, are we going to get a unanimous approval of the funding? If we're not going to get unanimous approval, we're wasting our time right now, because we need unanimous approval to spend the money, regardless of where it's going, because that's what our job is. And so we need to find out right now if we're going to get all the municipalities to vote for this, because if they don't, we're wasting our time, really.
All right, work across the top. You're next.
Thank you. Thanks, Elliot. That's a really good point, and it's a point I've been trying to make. And so I just want to make one point on the idea of the bids expiring and us giving direction tonight. And then if the general forum would allow me, I'd like to read some of a statement I have worked on, because a lot of folks have been asking me to help understand the Ferguson Township perspective. And so first, I'd like to state that if the bids expire at the end of this month and we're not making a decision until May, there is really no way that the authority can move forward with accepting those bids if we have either level 1 or level 4 of funding. Because if they move forward, accept bids based on 4, they're going to get themselves into legal trouble. If they move forward on 1, there is not enough money to accept all the bids as they are. So I would really like for somebody, after I make this statement, if you'd allow me, to explain to me how exactly that is going to work, especially if it's true that this general forum could add into that loan document conditions on how that money is spent. So how are the authority going to select bids if they don't know if we are going to allocate certain money to certain amenities? I don't think that they don't have the crystal ball and won't be able to do that. So I'm going to briefly just read some of this. It's a page and a half, so I probably won't get through it all, but the current position of the Ferguson Township Board really should be no surprise at all to the region. In regard to park design and cost containment priorities, let me refresh the regional memory on the long-standing charge with which the Whitehall Road Regional Park Phase 1 Reduced Option Ad Hoc Committee was tasked. The tasking was to make a plan, 1, small enough to cost $4.8 million or less. 2, within the previously approved master plan design approved in August 2010 and has since amended. And 3, and importantly, with a broad enough range of features to be accepted unanimously by municipal legislators as a regional park. This charge was confirmed many, many, many times over in public, that the design would represent a broad range of features, be consistent with the master plan, and most of all, be within budget. This is no surprise to anyone, and it's only been since the very recent request for additional funding that the charge regarding staying within budget has slipped off of some of the region's radar. Ferguson Township's current position is well within the parameters of that accepted and agreed to charge, and it indicates full cooperation with the region's municipalities. The currently proposed design, however, does not reflect the charge of the Phase 1 reduced option ad hoc committee. That priority fell to the wayside long ago. The emphasis of this current plan is very strongly and solely on the provision of rectangular fields, providing the foundation for the tournament facility, including parking. In this paring down process, the idea to complete a broad range of park amenities was completely lost. The plan that resulted is in fact in direct conflict with the provision of broad range of amenities. The Ferguson Township Board and I tried time after time over the past years to provide an opportunity to discuss park development regionally, and were repeatedly told it was solely in the purview of the authority as long as they stayed within budget. Some history of our current position, all publicly discussed, that I could go over, indicated things such as, if the Borough Water Authority stated there was risk to the wellhead, that was a showstopper. If COG identified some data that did not support the development of the amenities on the plan, that was a showstopper. Both of those things, as far as I understand, have since happened. In March of 2018, the Ferguson Township Board had another discussion about the planned infrastructure of Whitehall Road Regional Park. And afterward, I requested to the then COG executive director, please, in the interest of being fiscally responsible, efficient in use of resources, responsive to the Ferguson and regional taxpayer, and to be fair to all the regional partners in this endeavor, our board felt it important to have a discussion to help guide the authority and communicate our priorities to the rest of the region. I asked to have an agenda item on the next Capital Committee meeting at that time, and that never happened. In the August of 2018 General Forum, once again, it was confirmed that the park was to be constructed at a municipal cost not to exceed $4.8 million. And at that time, it was promised by the agency head that fundraising would close the gaping gap between the proposed development and the available funding. Also, that the reduction options, which the General Forum you've probably never heard of, but there were 4, proposed to reduce the costs, including reducing parking. Not only those options were not considered, but the option 1A presented to us at that time greatly expanded, including an expansion of planned parking from 373 spaces to 529. Unfortunately, planning for more than the funding allocated to them is a theme for the authority. Then we're put on the spot to come up with the funding, and now here we are. So before anyone accuses Ferguson Township of a lack of cooperation with the region, wanting to kill the park, or a lack of support for a regional amenity, please note that Ferguson Township has put forward far more dollars than any other municipality for this project. Not only did we lay out $147,000 for acquisition, $89,000 plus for planning, we were willing to cover the expensive hood in the concession stand if members could use it as a community kitchen in off hours. We were told no thank you, that the facility would always be in use by rectangular field users. Of course, now there's not even a concession stand for us to worry about, or a bathroom, or any pavilions. We already have a shell of a park, but with ample and even excessive parking. Lastly, in terms of extra funding, Ferguson Township recently contributed an additional $47,000 for landscaping that the authority failed to prioritize. That is $283,362 total, more than $250,000 above and beyond what we've paid through our COG shares that we have contributed. We are disappointed in what was selected as a priority for our regional park. And although the authority has jurisdiction to complete what they can with the $4.8 million, at least in our last discussion, Ferguson Township did not support, as a majority of our board, additional funding. I believe what we would support is another look at the amenities that have been prioritized within that plan to more closely match them with recent regional survey results and examination of the excessive giveaway found in the priority use agreements. Thank you very much for your time.
Bud has not had a chance to speak. We'll take Bud. and Rich,
Mr.
and
Chair, I'm
Teresa.
sorry, Mr. Chair, this is Scott.
Scott?
Mr. Marshall is unable to raise his electronic hand. I know he's been waiting. I don't know if he still wants to speak, but.
Well, he spoke once. Let's get the Bud. We'll come back to Peter. No one's going to be skipped. We'll just take it. Mr. Graham.
I thought I was in line, but I'm here now.
You are. Keep going.
I think you've just got a taste of why this park is becoming more expensive all the time. Let me go back a little bit. Why we have a shortfall in monies. When we laid this park out originally, the money would have covered that. That what we wanted, and this is exactly the park we wanted. I heard before the park we wanted, but this is pretty close to the park we wanted. Parking could be an issue and that type of thing, but when we started out, this much money was exactly the amount of money we needed to fund this park, and it should have been done. But as you know, we've had groups that have been filibustering against this. Maybe that's a strong word, but we've got groups that have been trying to scuttle it a little bit, trying to stall it, and they've done a wonderful job of it. And I know I'm hearing all the environmental factors, and they were all answered before. I think I see this as an investment in our community. I see this as something that our community needs. We need a regional park. I don't know that we should push this as a tournament park necessarily, because I think would be a small part of it. But I noticed a couple of letters coming up recently, and letters that our indoor recreation needs are starting to be met by two different facilities. The winter recreation is being met very well, but we are far behind for our kids, for our younger kids coming up. Then Mr. Cleese mentioned we've lost a generation of kids that could have used that park. I know everybody has their concerns environmentally, and they have their concerns with a lot of things, but this park could be designed wonderfully, and it could give all of our kids opportunities to do outdoor events. We want them to go outside. We want them to get out of the room. This is an opportunity for our area, our region, to have a great park and to have a great.
You weren't mute, Bud. You muted.
Have I been muted all the time?
No.
Oh, good. I don't know how that happened. I guess I was throwing my hands around. So, well, my point is, I see this as a great investment in our community. We need to sit down and maybe worry about too many parking. That could be an issue, cars, but we missed generations of kids to do this. We want to get our kids out. We want to get them out to do things. As I said before, this could be a good tournament park, but not necessarily. I think it's more for us. It's more for everybody. We know kids are growing. We need our soccer kids are growing, fields are growing, and I'm only using a small portion of this park. We have another 2 phases in that park that we can do whatever we want to do with it. So I'm just really frustrated now. I can see why it's costing us more money. It's not because we want to spend more, but because we're 10 years behind the ball. We're using 2012 monies to fund the 2021 park. So I said, let's go. I like the idea of looking at option 1, option 4, and maybe in between there, option 4 would be the maximum. We could scale it down, scale option 4 on down to maybe what we can get. I like to see restrooms on there also, but how can you do that? Maybe there's a way, but without taking some of the good amenities we've got in that park and keeping it a good park. So as I said before, it's really frustrating because we've had a group that has been really fought us all the way. Environmentally, their claim was environmental. Some of it may be true, some of it maybe not. But I'd like to see us get together and do this. And now we got 2 options to work for. Somewhere in between we can meet. Somewhere in the middle there we can do what we need to do. So I guess that's basically my filibuster for tonight. Thank you.
2 more comments from elected people. I think we pretty well covered that. Rich, and then Teresa. And I would like to go to community comments. So, Rich, briefly, please.
Yes, sir. I would just point the general forum to our agenda item 07B, which the front page of that itemizes the various numbers that we're talking about. I've heard a couple of our members indicate they don't know what they're getting for the various numbers in the summary from Mr. Gibbons. I would just shortfall it to say 7.4 refis what we got. 8.1 fills the shortfall of what has been bid and can be built based on executing a contract. That does not include restrooms, a maintenance building, or irrigation. If you want those things, the projected number is the 9 million. The numbers above that is if we really wanted to be ambitious and do what Ferguson actually recommended back in 15 years ago. And they asked us to take out $15 million back then to fund all of the parks and fill them fully. As Ms. Lafer shared with us a couple of meetings ago, they knew that what got borrowed was a compromise of what the borough and Patton Township would accept as a total borrowing. They knew at that time that it wasn't enough to build the whole park. That's unfortunate. But the reality is we're here today, and all these things and everything that's going through that's a lot of what's being talked about right now. This has been a 15-year, very public process with numerous votes along the way saying that this is where we want to go. I think it was Mr. Lord indicated that it's unfortunate that we took a vote 4 years ago and 8 years ago that didn't fund the park that we wanted. But that's what we did. We had just enough conceptual discussions to kick the can down the road. We're out of road. It's time to make a decision. We can either look to the horizon or we can look to the abyss. I know in College Township, we've reviewed this. We feel what's on the table currently best reflects our view of a regional park. And when I say that, that includes restrooms. That would be the ideal with a regional park. If it doesn't have those, we still support it, but it really does diminish the regional park side of it. So that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Laura and then Teresa, we're going to move to the community then. Laura, please.
I think Teresa was before me. I'm sorry, Chair.
Okay.
I don't mean to contradict you.
I'm just taking them from the left. Teresa, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I'm unmuted. I want to thank Rich, and I also want to thank Bud, because I came in 14 years ago. This was relatively new, and the land had been chosen, and the basic plans were being kicked all over the place. And you both put that in context nicely for me, because you were here that year before. I think at this point, first, I want this park, and I want it for our kids. I don't mind if other people come and use it, but I want it to be designed for our community. So my concern at this point is whichever one of these options we go with, and truthfully, I don't want to cut it short on money. I think there are certain things we have to be able to do. And I don't know if we can do them based on the comments that various people have made, but maybe we can. One, you cannot take a child with special needs to a park that does not have a functioning restroom. Period. You cannot say to a small child in any case, but certainly to one with special needs, oh, you only have to hold it for another hour. Can't be done. It's even cruel to think about it. So this park that is partly designed for them will be inaccessible to them. That's stupid. That's a waste of money. Two, I'm sorry, gentlemen. There isn't a woman here who's going to use a tree if she's in need. But I've traveled with my daughter's hockey team, And I can tell you, there wasn't a man in the group who didn't think stopping along the highway and using a tree wasn't sufficient. And they will treat our park that way. We need restrooms for safety's sake and for reasonable accommodations for everyone. I mean, that's a public health hazard. I'm sorry, guys, but that's how life works. Secondly, for funding, if we need a restroom, among other things, then we need fewer parking spaces, probably, and we do not need lights. We can have a sunrise to sunset park, period. We can have some lights along the main paths to get back to the cars and out. I'm sorry, we do not need great big lights, which will get bigger and brighter and stronger. In case you all haven't noticed, everybody now is buying wonderful new lights. The problem is the lumens they put out are atrocious. There will never be anything resulting in a dark sky from that park ever if we put in the kind of lighting that everybody wants for their fields. So take out the lighting, cut down on the parking, put in the restroom, and then we figure out how many fields we can provide for our kids to play soccer. There'll be plenty of them. And eventually, if we really need them, there's enough space there, acreage, that we can add something in the future. But for now, Bud and Rich are absolutely right. We said we wanted this. We committed ourselves to this, and we have so far gotten almost nothing. It is time to cut the crap and put the money into the area and make it usable for the maximum number of local people and children and adults who want to use those fields or those walking paths, especially since they're going to be attached to Muzzer's Gap, et cetera. They're going to be excellent paths. We need to have them, and we need to have them 8 years ago. You're absolutely right. So let's stop playing games. But I want to know how we can guarantee that when we say we're spending 4 million, 6 million, 8 million, that it includes something as simple as a restroom and parks for kids to play on. And that does not mean at midnight. My daughter used to do her skating at 5 a.m. They needed electric lights. It is not the best way to have a public park. So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa.
Let's wrap
Thanks,
this
Chair.
up with Laura and Rich, Laura and Rich, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Teresa.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Chair. I wanted to speak to a couple points, and then I wanted to reiterate a question. So I think Rich and Teresa made a lot of good points, except for the fact that we have yet to identify a mechanism by which we can control what the authority does after we give them the money. And that is a huge problem. If that problem were solved, which I've been saying that for years now, if that problem were solved, I guarantee you we would not be in this circular conversation right now. This would have been solved. These problems would have been worked out because the elected officials would actually be talking about it and informed about it and shaping the park that we want. So at this point, what's my point? We have absolutely no authority to guarantee that what Rich says is itemized would actually be built. Next, I want to speak to Bud's point that there was a group that's an environmental group that's filibustering and causing the delay. Bud, review the history, okay? The master plan of this park was passed in 2010. Nobody even knew who the Toll Brothers were until 2015, all right? There were 5 years there when nobody did anything on this. And the reason why is because this region pinned our abilities on a private developer being interested in that parcel. And that right there was the first and primary and biggest delay of this. The lawsuit with the tolls lasted a year, and that is the only time that was taken up. The entire rest of the time since 2010, that ball has been in our court, and we have failed to push it down the field. Refer to my previous comment about the problem with the structure that we are encountering. Next, problem with the structure related to the agreements. Well, those priority use agreements that were signed that sign over the use of our parks to two specific groups for a huge amount of time. And if you have not read them, I really recommend that you read them. Read them. When we're talking about providing a park for our residents, even within that is a very narrow sliver of individuals that we have prioritized use of these parks for. And that is completely inappropriate. Now, why am I referring to our confusing structure? Because in the document that we all signed with the authority, it specifically states that by unanimous approval of all the municipalities is the only way a use agreement that gives priority or time to a certain group would be approved. That never happened. Now, I would like to hear the executive director speak to that as well and let me know what agreement is in place that subsumed that into non-existence. Next, I want to ask this general forum, and I'm really serious when I ask this question. Who among us in our own municipalities would take out a master plan of a park that is 10 years old, okay? 10 years old, and decide that we need to move forward, fast forward on that outdated master plan with no refreshing of that master plan? Who among us would do that? Certainly not Ferguson Township. A 10-year-old master plan is an obsolete master plan. Why are we doing this? Why are we so afraid to look at what the comp plan has identified and the regional survey and apply that data to a new master plan before moving forward? Why are we so afraid of that? Last, I would like an answer to the question that I previously posed. The bids expire at the end of March, correct? Tonight, we are only deciding on a potential funding option to get feedback. Right now, the amendment on the table is option 1 and option 4. And we have, many of us have talked about including conditions on that funding. For example, allocating it to bathrooms or some other amenity. I don't know. How is the authority proposing that they are going to move forward to accept any bids when they cannot possibly know how much money that they have to work with? Please, I would like answers to the 2 questions I've posed. 1, the question about the bids and the timing, and 2, the question about the priority use agreements and what agreement is now in place that has subsumed the requirement of unanimous approval by the general forum for those 2, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich, last comment from elected officials. We'll move on.
Right. Yeah, as long as we need to ensure if we can answer Laura's questions there that we do that. Just 2 points to Ms. Lafer's discussion about the lighting. Just a reminder that the majority of the money for the lighting was donated specifically for that use. So you may not install the lights, but you have to give back the money that you received to install those. It doesn't move the park forward. It doesn't move the base park forward. The parking discussion, that is certainly something to be reviewed. Just a reminder that we have to be compliant with the Ferguson Township ordinances as well. So there may be limit on what we can do with that. And I can't agree with Laura more that we need to take action sooner rather than later to improve the structure of our parks program and the relationship between the authority, the agency, and the elected and the municipalities so that we're all in sync. With that said, I know, again, for College Township, that I can only say what a wonderful relationship that we have with our rep, that we are in step and we are in sync. And if there isn't that with all of the municipalities, it should be something that everyone should strive for. And then finally, I would be remiss to not remind the general forum that by the actions of this body, even though we don't have a park yet, by the actions of this body and its staff have saved the municipalities $5.7 million on what was originally committed to build these parks. Ideally, that money would be in the bank. It would be in the COG bank. Instead, it's in the municipality's bank. That money's spent. There's no question about that. It is related in not having a tax increase for our regional residents, and that's a good thing. But we also have to acknowledge that we are getting out of what we originally committed to 15 years ago with a hell of a bargain. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, we've missed Mr.
Told
Marshall.
me, Peter's, I see Peter's hand up. Your yellow hand isn't working, Pete. Go ahead.
Thanks. It's pretty clear that the only unanimous thing we'll get is the agreement that we get this item 1 and item 4 considered. I don't understand exactly why Chris Gibbons, what he's going to do with just those two. I mean, he's already done. We already know what the estimated cost will be and how much will go for the park. So I'm not sure what he's going to do that would limit us to those two things. But what I suggest is that we vote on the motion that's before us. And because of the issue, and it's a real issue that I guess Laura brought up first, about what we want in that park, and then what we can afford, I would suggest that after we vote on the motion to get Chris Gibbons on board and look at, I think we can look at more than 1 and 4. I think he's already done that, really. But then a representative, a manager, and 1 or 2 representatives from each of the communities get together and talk about what we really want. See if we can get an agreement that we want restrooms and we want 2 fields or 3 fields or 5 fields, whatever it is. And then once that's done, and if we do get an agreement there on the facilities, then it's just a question of picking out which financing we want. I think we need to go forward tonight, get Chris Gibbons on. I think we have about as much information as he's going to be able to provide anyway, but then put together a working committee with 1 or 2, I would say 2 people, a manager and someone chosen from the boards or councils, to sit down, look at the facilities, look at the plan, decide what the priorities are, figure out, I mean, we know what they'll cost. We have bids. They have all the information that we need to make those decisions. Now, if the worst comes to worst and that group can't agree on anything, well, then we just go with 1. But I think that we can get agreement once people, I think we can get agreement on the facilities. And once we do that, we can determine how much money that we need and move forward. That's what the only way I can see that we're going to move forward is doing those 2 things. Vote on it tonight and get this committee together to actually look at what we want in the park. Because I think Laura brings up a good point. It's a 10-year-old thing. We have a limited amount of money. Let's figure out what we want and move forward with it.
Okay, I see. Eric, you have something to add?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call the question.
Okay.
I'd like an answer to my questions first, please.
Well,
I
I'd like to
posed
call the
them
question.
twice.
Let's call the question and vote on this.
Bud, I asked 2 questions and I'd like them answered, please.
There's a point of order, and that is when someone calls the question, no other business can take place if it's seconded, and a vote has to be taken immediately on the calling of the question. That's parliamentary procedure.
We need a two-thirds vote on the question, so.
I think
call
I
the
just called the
question.
question. If somebody seconds it, then we have to vote on it.
Second,
I don't know who that was.
Peter Marshall.
Peter, okay. So we're ready to vote on the call for question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Hang on, I thought we were going to unit vote. Aren't we going to a unit vote?
Well, this is just a question.
We'll get to that. The unit vote has to do with every finance.
Point of order, I would like to request a unit vote on the call of the question.
Okay.
I have a second point of order, and that is that the unit vote on the calling of the question does not, I don't believe, needs to be unanimous to call the question. Is that correct?
2/3.
2/3.
Okay, thank you.
Aren't we just voting on the amended thing at this
I
point?
don't even know. I don't know what we're doing right now.
We're voting on calling.
We voted on the amendment to the motion that's in the agenda.
What we're voting on now is whether or not we're going to vote on the main motion.
Correct.
Bud called the question, so if it passes by 2/3, then we go directly to a vote. If it doesn't pass by 2/3, discussion continues.
Okay.
That's the calling question.
So Bud's motion means that we'll have no comment from the people, the citizens whatsoever.
Absolutely. This is NBEC, and if you can hear me, we totally object. You promised us comment, and we totally object to not having comment at this time.
I'm just confused about process, because the way the agenda was written is if we go to the vote, all of the public comment has to happen before then. So the fact that Bud called the question, I think it means that we won't be able to have public comment. I'm just asking, is that actually true?
That's not my interpretation. That's the call for the question on municipal input in the discussion. I'm perfectly fine to go with community input, but I think it's time to call the question on what we've talked about so far.
Well, calling the question goes immediately to a vote under Robert's Rules of Orders. So if the question has been called, if it passes by 2/3 majority, then we go immediately to a vote. Now, we could take further input after that at the discretion of the chair or as another topic, but the motion that is on the table has been called. And if that vote passes, then we go immediately to a vote.
So to be clear, that means if the motion passes, there will be no public input until after our vote. Is that correct?
Right.
All right. Well, everybody keep it in mind when they're voting then on Bud's calling of the question.
Mr. Chair, may I interject with another point?
Who's that,
Under
Paul?
special
No, there can
rules-
be no discussion.
Oh, hell yeah.
We have to vote on the call for the question. Scott?
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms.
Hey, Scott, give me a number. We need 2/3 vote on the call for the question. How many members do we have on the call, and what is 2/3 of that?
No, it's 2/3 of the municipalities. It's a unit vote.
Mr. Chair, prior to any unit vote, any member of the forum can request that individual vote records be provided to the recording secretary for inclusion in the minutes. I would like to make such a request.
Are you going to provide those coming out?
That is correct. According to the special rules of order under type 1 unit votes, any member may request that municipalities provide individual vote records to the recording secretary for inclusion in meeting minutes.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms and the 5-minute discussion. you will see an invitation to go into your meeting room. I have had some members of the public
Hey, Mr. Chair, this is Eric Bernier with College. We didn't vote. We didn't realize.
No, I'm gonna call the. Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
The only thing we were deciding, as far as I understood, is whether we were going to call the question.
Right.
Not actually
That's right. This is where the 2/3 comes in.
So I'll take a municipal roll call there. This is State College Borough,
No.
College Township,
We got cut off before we voted.
Oh.
It said
it
the
was a
break room
5
was,
minute.
it said it was
Oh, you're
supposed to be-
slow.
Yes, we are. I won't deny that.
You're not supposed to have any discussion when you call the question. You're supposed to take a vote.
No, well, we took a comfort break, needed comfort break. And by the time we all got back together, we had 8 seconds. Sorry.
We all need
Bad
comfort
planning
right
on
now.
everybody's part, then, Eric.
You know, it's late. Well, by College Township meeting standards, it's not late, but by normal meeting standards, it is.
Oh, who else is back, Scott?
Well, that will tell you
So-
how important restrooms are.
So,
Scott?
what would you like me to put for College Township?
Good point, Janet.
Why don't you take the rest of them and see?
Ferguson Township,
No.
Good.
Harris Township.
Amy?
What was
Harris
that, Jenny?
Harris Township voted no.
Patton Township.
No, unanimous.
Same.
Okay.
Ours was 4-3, but I think Tom Fontaine has the list, I think.
Paul,
I
is it
have it
okay-
too.
Paul, is it okay? So your request, if those are emailed to me, the breakdowns?
What was that, Scott?
Paul had requested that breakdown individually within the unit be presented. Was
I
that
requested that they be included in the future minutes as per the guidelines.
Okay. So municipal managers, could you get those to me, please?
So can we get the public comments now?
We can get the public comment now.
That'd be good.
Great.
And an answer to my questions.
No,
I will just.
Let's, Scott, can you get the yellow hand feature from community people to see what that group looks like?
Yes, so it looks like Jenny Evans is up first for community input.
I lost my full screen of all the tiles. I'm down to showing just 5, so you'll have to help me with the yellow hand until we get that.
Sure, we had Jenny Evans followed by Randolph Hudson.
Okay.
Thanks.
Now, me something.
Can you turn?
Wow.
There we go.
Are you
Is that better?
watching?
Yeah, something- you gotta
I want to
mute
put
something.
the cat among the wombats or whatever. So I keep hearing you all worrying about the budget and how we can't do what's meant to be done. And I completely agree with the idea of needing restrooms at any kind of a park. I want to propose that why don't we do a low impact version, do a phase 1A or something that follows on from the results of the survey from the comprehensive plan and get at least something that people can look at and call a park, and something that, you know, like Bud was saying, would let the kids get outside. It'd be passive recreation. I know it's not the current plan, but it would get us a park.
Okay, come on.
Randolph Hudson is next.
Totally agree. A park should be a park from day one. And I'm speaking for NVAC. I'm in Ferguson Township. Totally agree with Bud Graham. We want to a wonderful design that results in a park that's safe and beautiful and affordable and soon. This ought to be easy. The 350 additional excess parking spaces are costing us about $2.5 million. So if we can't come up with a beautiful park that responds to everybody and really looks like a park, shame on us. I think this is easy. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Dorothy Blair's up next.
Fine, keep going with them.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to have some comment here. I thought you were all doing such a great job. I wasn't sure I was needed at all, but well, thank you for all your comments. As you know, Nittany Valley Environmental Coalition is a 501c4, and we have a legal obligation to represent and protect our members' environmental rights. And that is also based on the Pennsylvania Bill of Rights and the taxpayers' rights, right? What are taxpayers paying for? So we would particularly like to have park amenities that can be obtained with the lowest level of borrowing, with savings from finances guaranteed to be spent on adequate and permanent restrooms. But we really look forward to being involved at the table in a reevaluation of park priorities. We do object to the way the parkland is to be treated in the process of becoming a tournament park, but we are reasonable and we do not wish to exclude soccer. We support an inclusive park that works for all members of the center community. Thank you very much.
Matthew Cox, yellow hand.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The master plan I saw is outdated, or I'm not sure if it's the current one. It mentioned there was a 2013 update, but I've only seen the 2010. But, all this talk of parking spaces, I looked at the drawing and I read the whole master plan. I saw no mentions of bicycle facilities, for people who don't want to take their car there, people who want to just take their bike there, do some activities and call it a day. Most of the parks have that. I just didn't see it anywhere, and I thought maybe I overlooked it or missed it, and maybe it's in the 2013 plan, but I was just curious what it was. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Oliver.
I see no other members of the community. I thought Eric hold his hand up.
Bill Keogh
Bill
wants to
Keogh
comment.
can't
I'm
find
sorry.
the,
I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
I got a David Stone and a Bill. Bill, go ahead.
Which do you want first?
Bill.
Okay, this is Bill Keogh. I've heard a lot of comment about the interest in passive amenities, and I'm trying to figure out in my own mind that there is a whole plot of university land between the park and Route 45 that is currently in its design phase with 5 different designs for passive recreation and natural features. I know that's not part of the Whitehall Road Park design. However, right next to the Whitehall Road Park design is proposed, and it may take another few years for it to happen, but a huge amount of land that is specifically being designed and provided with those passive features. And I have to ask myself the question without an answer, but why would we want to take this rather expensive plot of land, the park, and make it the same as a proposed adjacent piece of property when we have needs for both passive and active? I know it's not part of your voting, but clearly when I hear references to passive, I look at the university proposal that is on the table, that is being worked through the system in terms of that passive area between Route 45 and the park. That's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I see Mr. Hudson and Mr. Stone. Randy?
Yeah, this is Randy. I've just got a quick answer for Bill. I grew up in State College and I watched one after the other as Penn State withdrew its beloved facilities like Rec Hall and the IM building from town use. And I was a founding member of the State Theater. And the reason we built the State Theater, thanks to all the generosity from local families, was so we would have our own place, and it gives us control. We can't control what Penn State's going to do. So this gives us, and we can do specified facilities just that we in the region want, irrespective of Penn State. So it's a great opportunity, and it sits beautifully alongside active recreation.
Thank you, Randy. David Stone, then Dan Cleage.
Yeah, this is Dave Stone, Nittany Valley Environmental Coalition. A couple things that haven't been said. Number one is that what is being done in this so-called phase one is a lot of foundational work for future phases. And the problem I see, and I think it's a legal problem, is you are going to the investment community and you're going to people with whom you're signing agreements. And on the one hand, the impression is being given that there is going to be a full build out of a tournament park, which is going to generate revenue and it's going to do all these great things. And at the same time, the knowledge among all of us here, most of us, is that that future spending for phases 2, 3, and 4 is not even being talked about. But yet in phase one, the park authority refuses to let go of about $3.5 million of grading and paving and all this stuff, and $1 million between the lighting. Yeah, maybe that's offset, but there's still a $500,000 in electrical hookup. All this stuff in phase one that really isn't there for a self-contained park. It's being sold. The RFP to the investment community is based on the predicate that it is a viable park with all this eventual stuff being built is in phase 2, 3, and 4. I think this is a real legal problem. The second problem is this whole issue of, whether it has to be a unit vote, a unanimous vote, or something else. That is hazy stuff. And when you're playing around with the investment community, you're making affirmations. When the park authority is making statements to its bidders, when you're signing contracts with different parties, I think you need absolute clarity on what you are building, where it ends up, what you're going to build in future phases. So this is the time to reevaluate. We want to participate. We want to be at the table. We have to be at the table. We proposed ideas 4, 5, 6 years ago, which would have had a park up there already. Nobody listened to us. We proposed shortcuts for sewer hookup. We wanted to get something built because frankly, we thought that if people went up there, they would help us on the Toll Brothers matter. It was Penn State's obligation. They got passed through when they sold to Toll Brothers. If the land swap had happened, Penn State would have built the access we needed and this wouldn't have been a problem. Let's get all at the table. Again, I don't think you can go to the investment community, even in this motion that's up here tonight, and get an honest answer if they don't have clarity on exactly what the borrowing is for and what the park authority is promising and the financial stability of this park as a tournament complex based on the tax revenue that's going to flow back to the community. I think this is all built on sand, as somebody said. I think it might be built on water. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Mr. Cleage, please.
Thank you, Denny. As you all know, in your digital packet, there was a letter that I wrote, and that was the Susie Sunshine version of some of the thoughts I've been going through my mind listening to some of the discussion tonight. I'm not going to get into all the things I could talk about, but I do want to address a couple points that I heard. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what the current phase one reduced modified committee, what the phase one that was bid without the restroom and all the other things actually looks like. But I know from the intent of the beginning, that small park that we're spending these hours over this evening is not a regional park. In fact, it would mirror some municipal parks, College Township, Patton Township, as far as the size and the amenities, the number of playing fields. So for those of you who have never visited a regional park, I would strongly suggest you get in your cars tomorrow. It's still supposed to be a very nice day. And you drive out South Atherton into Harris Township, and you turn left on Warner Boulevard, and you go, I guess, about a mile or so and turn right onto Linden Hall Road, and then take another quick right at the sign, and you go up into Oak Hall Regional Park. And you will see 4 playing fields. You will see a non-paved parking lot. You will see a walking path, which is a passive amenity. And you will see the structure that was beginning and what was deemed to be phase 1 of of Oak Hall Regional Park. I think if you do that, you will have a better picture of what it is you're discussing for this potential phase 1 borrowing. There's one thing I really want to say, but I'm going to leave it out. So maybe I'll send another memo when I think it's appropriate. But the last thing I want to say, if there's anyone in any municipality who is new to their municipal board or new to the COG General Forum, and speaking as someone who spent a number of years there, I basically didn't say much the first 4 because, you know, it's a lot of strong personalities sometimes. But anyway, anyone who would like to reach out to me to discuss anything about the history of the parks or the regional park discussions back in their infancy, I authorized Scott Binkley to give out my personal email address, but I would ask that you do it through Scott as opposed to me saying it in public for the entire world. No restrictions. It doesn't have to be even just the municipal officials. It could be anyone, but I'd be happy to discuss an accurate, as I remember it, vision and version of what transpired from the mid-2000s until my term ended in 2012. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Scott, we have more community hands.
Do not
I see none. I see Eric waving vividly over there, so. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, respond to a few things. There have been a couple of questions about what is the scope of the project, what was bid, so on and so forth. And, as Joe mentioned at the outset a while ago this evening, we started in September with a Zoom and Learn. Staff put together a presentation that has been available on the COG website since then. But it was a presentation designed to enable all of the elected officials to find out where things are in terms of the project, what the options are in terms of the financing, so that we could keep pace with making decisions regarding financing so that the project could stay on course, because there are a lot of grants and donations that have been secured for the project. Thanks to the hard work of Pam and staff in Parks and Recreation. And there are things that are going to be put at risk if we go much further into 2021 without acting and completing awarding of contracts and that sort of thing. So we started in September trying to bring everybody up to a common level of understanding. Site plans were shared, all of that sort of information was there. And we've been available and have come out, staff, Joe, Pam, and myself have been to a number of the municipal meetings and have answered a number of those questions. So that information is still on the website. We hope people will take a look at that from the community, as well as elected officials who are wanting to refresh their memories. One of the things that was asked earlier about approvals had to do with the master plan for phase 1. Well, that was on the agenda January 1st, 2019, and that was discussed after a presentation by Pam Salakangas and Jim Steff, and it was I think, yeah, 5-0 vote with Half Moon abstaining on a unit vote to approve that amended master plan. One of the other questions that was asked involved the development of the project. The lease that was approved includes section 4, the lessee shall have the obligation and right, and the lessee in this case is the Center Region Parks and Recreation Authority, shall have the obligation and right to develop Whitehall Road Regional Park in accordance with the master site plan approved by the COG General Forum. Lessee shall be responsible for design, bidding, and construction as a part of the overall development process. Lessee shall have full responsibility for implementation of the approved development plans. The next section is operation and maintenance. Lessee shall have the full responsibility for the construction operation of the park facilities, whatsoever kind and whatsoever nature, including but not limited to turf, trees, landscaping, maintenance, asphalt, snow removal, etc. And then to a question Mr. Nittany asked, program responsibility. Lessee shall be fully responsible for programming activities to be carried out within the park. So this is some of the background, and I did consult with our solicitor regarding the lease and the transfer of that responsibility to the Center Region Parks and Recreation Authority. He confirmed that yes, they have the responsibility to exercise the lease, to award the contracts and complete the project as funded. I don't have that in writing as of this point, but he did confirm that was his opinion. And so I wanted to share that in response to the questions that were asked earlier. And I will supply that written opinion when I have that in hand later this week.
See yellow hand, Amber Concepcion.
Hi, thank you. I just want to first note that I'm just speaking for myself and not representing the school district in these comments. I've been following the development of this park, over the course of the time that the COG has been working on it. Certainly in the time that I've been a school board member, which is about 11 years at this point, 10 years. I don't know enough about some of the financial issues that are causing concern at this point. I'm following that bids have come in higher than you would have hoped. But my only request would be to please not let all the efforts that have been put into this park so far come to naught, and to please, whatever it takes to make this happen, to please keep working on it. And because I think the kids in our community deserve to have, it's going to be the kids of the next generation in our community deserve to have a park like this. One of the most frequent requests we get from groups in the community is for rectangular field space from the school district. And there's a lot of competition in the community to get access to rectangular field space. It's very much needed. And that's what allows more kids to have access to activities, not just the most competitive ones. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Now we have any yellow hands that have not been called upon.
Mr. Chair, if I could just.
Okay, but I'm gonna get to Laura. I'm gonna call this pretty soon because it's 9:30. We've been going a long time. So, Eric, you wanna?
I just wanted to follow up on one thing that was in the comment that was just made. The bids we have received actually are very favorable. And one of the things that are at risk right now, if the Parks and Recreation Authority does not award the contracts to begin with those bids, we may be at risk of having to rebid. And now that the economy is starting to improve, we may be at the risk of having to spend much more money on a number of the line items in the bids that were bid in last fall in November. So.
Thank you so much for that clarification.
Paul?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I just wanted to, again, request that before we break into a unit vote, that the municipalities provide the individual vote records to the recording secretary for this vote as well. Thank you.
Okay, Laura?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to re-request again. I think Eric thought he answered my question, but I wanted to re-request that my questions be answered. And then also, if we are addressing public comment, that the cyclist question be answered. So I'm sure Ferguson's also interested in it. Are there, in addition to the 529 parking spaces, are there bicycle facilities that are being provided in terms of what that itemized budget says they're going to be doing? Then my two questions were, one, not related anymore to the construction contracts, but related to the unanimous approval required for priority use agreements in the planning and development document. And two, please explain to me, if the bids expire at the end of March and we are selecting multiple options, say we select option number one, and our full intention is to put some constraints on that funding within the loan document, how is the authority going to move forward on bids before they know how much money they're going to have to work with? And that's the really, really important question for tonight, given that it really relates to what our decision is. So could we please answer that first?
I may need Pam's help to answer the question about the bike racks, and I think Pam has already responded about the priority use agreement, but I think it would be appropriate for Pam to answer that question. Pam, are you still available?
Pam, you on? Apparently not.
She's on.
I have asked Matthew Cox to contact me directly so that I can review the master plan of the park facility and demonstrate to him how the bike path and the sidewalks through the yards connect to Whitehall Road Regional Park for cyclists,
Okay.
as well as the connection for the Musser Gap Trail. And within the FF&E of that park, there will be bike racks provided at the park facility.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to?
Mr. Chair, Elliott has his hand up.
You still didn't answer my question about the bids. Please, please, it's very important that we understand how this process works. We've been told as a general forum that we can put constraints on that money in a loan document, but they're going to accept bids before we put those constraints on. Please explain to me how that works, please.
I see you, Peter, that's right.
Well, the obvious.
We're trying to answer, you're gonna answer a question?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
What I would do is ask the successful bidder to extend the bid for another month or whatever. And if they will do that, and normally they will do that, it gives you more time.
They already extended the bids once, and I don't know that they would again.
Well, I don't
so
either.
given the conditions that we have and what we've been told at General Forum, that we can put constraints on that money, how are they going to accept the bids before they know what money they have to utilize?
Well, let me, I think Lou can help out with answering that question about beginning to award the contracts, or maybe Pam.
So Laura, to your specific question about how to manage those bids that are going to expire, personally and professionally, I don't know that it would be fair to ask them to extend their bids any longer. We've already got an extension. The market is changing. As far as the bids themselves, we would like to be able to prioritize and get you all a very reliable schedule so that we can also manage the financing options and give real-time information. The bids are the bids. There's no negotiation beyond that. However, getting that work prioritized and scheduled would be our next effort. So there would be pre-construction agreements that allow us to plan a milestone and critical path schedule. And the actual work then would be contracted once financing's in place.
Okay.
So are you saying that you're going to accept bids that you are $700,000 to $800,000 in the hole that you don't have the money for? I'm sorry, that I
I
don't
did not
understand.
say, I did not say that at all. I said that we
Okay.
would award pre-construction agreements to allow the financing decision to be made. But in parallel, we can start to work on a critical milestone and critical path schedule so that the timing is very well defined for this group.
Thank you, Elliot.
Is there a motion on the floor? Because
There's a motion on there's a motion on the floor regarding working with Concord Financial. And we have an amendment to that with respect to adding option 1 and 4. And somehow Scott has to work that narratively into the motion. So the motion we have not voted on.
I would offer a motion that we pick item 4 and be done with it and let's get going. But the thing that's on the floor there is fine too, because we still get going.
The amended motion included 1 and 4. I don't want to go back and amend that motion and take 1 out because we're just going round and round and round. So if we're
And
finished, Scott, we have more yellow hands?
Seeing none,
Option
Mr.
1 includes 2 options though.
Yes.
Okay.
Call for the question.
Okay.
No, let's not go back through that.
Do we need to, we want to do a unit vote on the call for question or we can do it individually?
No, come on.
I would prefer doing it individually.
There has been no second for that call.
We have a second, don't we? Correct?
Let's vote.
I'll second it.
Okay.
No, that means we have to vote again for the call to question. I thought the chair was about to just call for the vote. So now, because the question was called and seconded, the parliamentary procedure is we now have to go to another vote.
But we don't need to do it in unit vote.
No.
We can do it individually. So all in favor of accepting the call for questions, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sounds unanimous. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now let's go back to the original motion as found on page 7 with the addition of the options. We have a motion and a second on that. All in favor of that, signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chair,
Pardon?
a unit vote's been called for.
Oh. It's quick playing games, folks.
It's always been a unit vote, Mr. Chair.
Always.
No, that is.
All right.
Unit vote.
We don't need to do a unit vote on this because it doesn't be unanimous. It can be an individual vote.
So we can
If I
still
do a
call
unit
for a
vote,
unit vote.
we're doing unit
Point of
vote.
order. Point of
Pardon?
order. In the agenda, it says it's supposed to be a unit vote. It's been
Okay,
requested.
do a unit vote. Scott, take us out again.
All right.
Danny, before we break out, do we want to make sure that we have the right question that everybody's voted on and read it off for each municipality before they leave?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think we know.
The motion,
don't assume.
the motion as found on page 4 needs to have the option added to it. The motion we added with the option.
Options 1 and 4.
Correct. You
And
put that-
1 really has 2 options in it,
Yeah,
correct?
that, Laura.
1A and 1B.
We know that.
Okay, well, I'm just making sure, okay?
Yeah,
We're paying
okay.
attention.
All right. So we are recessing at 9:44.
Take us out again.
State College Borough,
Yes.
College Township,
Yes.
Ferguson Township,
Yes.
Harris Township,
Yes.
and Patton Township.
Yes.
All right. And municipal managers, please let me know of those breakout either by email or group chat. Thank you.
Okay, now it takes us back to the first motion on page 7. We've had so many votes already. I'm not sure exactly what we're voting on, but we did have a motion and second on the motion on page 7.
Mr. Chair, I think we're done with item number 7.
Yes, that was the unit
That's the
vote.
vote we just had.
Yeah, we're on to number 8, university report.
I'm not sure we did a vote on 7.
We literally, I thought we just broke out in our session.
Yeah,
That's what we just did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we came back to report that vote.
What was Harris Township voting on then?
I should.
This is upset because Michigan won.
Yeah, we voted.
Yeah, we're on to agenda item number 8, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Serena still on?
I'm here. I'll be brief. Most
Okay.
of the things that I sent you all via email, you have most of the updates. I'll put a link to commencement in the chat for when you want to know more details about commencement. I will reiterate that if we need to pivot due to the governor's orders or any other things, we will do that. Also, just return to work. We are starting to think about that. And so I think I sent everyone that link as well, but I'll go ahead and put that in the chat too. We'll have more details to come about return to work. And we're also just having a spring practice game in April that will, I guess, probably take the place of Blue White, where our first year students will be able to see our football players practice. So last reminder, Data for Action Lunch and Learn, March 24th at 12 p.m. If you haven't registered, it's not too late to do so. And we will be having that reported by CNET as well. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Ms. Shirley. State College Area School District, is Gretchen on?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Because of what you all just were discussing, I'll go ahead and report on. I have 2 items to report to you. I'll start with the use of SCASD facilities. And the school district is working internally with its health and safety team to reopen outdoor facilities to the community. SCASD is hopeful that this will occur in the next week, and the district will contact CRPR due to the Class A designation to reflect the priority access to facilities. So that's good news in terms of getting kids back on fields. The second item is the COVID-19 vaccine. The district partnered with Center Volunteers in Medicine to host 3 Super Saturday clinics over the past 6 weeks. At these clinics, 6,000 community members have received Pfizer vaccines. Another clinic is scheduled for April 10th. And the district partnered with the Center Intermediate Unit number 10 to host a vaccine clinic on from March 13th through the 16th. This clinic was part of the governor's directive to prioritize employees of pre-K through 12th grade schools. During the clinic, almost 1,800 employees from school districts and private and charter schools from Clearfield, Clinton, and Center counties received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and a second clinic may be held for additional education employees still in need of the vaccine. As of today, 1,120 SCASD district employees have self-reported receiving at least 1 dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carson. Executive Director report. Eric, any update on where'd Eric go?
Yes. Just a couple of quick things. We did put the March activity report in the packet, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on that if there are any. And you just heard Sharima and Gretchen both mention that those two organizations are working on phase reopening plans, and likewise the COG is working on that as well. Our various agencies are developing plans to bring more folks who have been working at home, working remotely, back into the workplace. The library is working on gathering feedback from patrons and key users, and developing plans to begin gradually reopening the library when that time is right. So we are working on a number of those items, and we'll have more to report in the coming weeks on that. And just wanted to give you that update. And as Scott mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we had a new information slide we're testing to try to speed the start of the meetings and maybe have our meetings go more quickly. But any feedback on that, we'd appreciate that as well. And so with that, I'll wrap up and offer to answer any questions on items that are in the packet.
Questions of Eric? Agency director reports, any update about what was distributed? Questions of the director? Not hearing any, okay. Committee reports? Rich?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the Executive Committee met on March 16th and compiled the current agenda. As we have done to this evening, we had an extensive discussion of Whitehall Road Regional Park, such that we did bump a couple items on the agenda to April. Pending any questions, that is my report.
Thank you. Finance, Evan?
The report, as is listed in the agenda, most accurately shows what we talked about. Mostly the park that we just talked about. I will not belabor that. So it's all written out there for you. If anybody has any questions, I'll be done.
Thank you. Human resources, who's doing that one? Bob? I saw him before. Where'd he go?
There we are. I will, I'll take the same path and with the eye of time here. But both of the agenda items in our human resource meeting came to the general forum this evening and were discussed previously. And we meet again on April 7th. So
good. Parks Capital? Laura,
I think.
Can we make it sort of brief because it's running into the late hours, so.
Oh, you beat me to my punchline. I was going to say that this is going to be a much more brief report than normal. I'm just going to hit the highlights.
I'm giving you some time. That's enough.
First, Sharima gave us a report on the Musser to Valley Land project, and 2 items of concern emerged from the committee. One is the lack of appropriate crossing on Route 45. Currently, as far as I understand it from our Ferguson Township manager, there is an agreement in place that says that Penn State is responsible for those pavement markings, but they are declining to comply with that as far as I understand. So Ferguson Township is going to go ahead and put that into our line painting contract if we find that there's no additional liability associated with doing so. The second item of concern that emerged was the fact that we are hoping that Whitehall Road Regional Park will connect with Musser Gap, but at this point in time, there is no written formal agreement that guarantees that. And as some of you know, some of Ferguson Township residents are now barred from using the land adjacent to Fairbrook Park that the university owns. So some additional concern has come up given that the ag focus of that potential land and having people access that land. So we're a little concerned about that. We also talked about the comp plan, and I'll just highlight 3 points and then I'll be done with my report. The 3 items that we talked about in terms of the comp plan were benchmarking, governance, and last but not least, a map of the region that shows regional green spaces, bike paths, greenways and parks that is not yet in existence that the comp plan was to address but did not. So we just had a really robust discussion about that. Thank you.
Thank you for the brevity. Public Safety Committee did not meet. Joint Public Service and TLU. Teresa, you want to report on that, or you just want me to say a few words?
I have a comment on that. I actually missed this particular one, which was long, convoluted, and full of information, all of which I did receive in both written and what have you form. I think we need one more TLU meeting together before we come near concluding. We all agreed on a number of things that we need to combine. And that was the main discussion, the combination and what things we were going to cover. But I don't think they're organized well enough. And I think if the members of the TLU committee can join me, and obviously Jim May, et cetera, will have to set up a time. I think perhaps we can organize this a little better. I want the merger to work. And at the moment, I think the merger does not make things better. It spread them out and didn't help answer the important questions. So basically, we need to figure out how to make these two committees work. The object was to make sure that information flowed smoothly. And my concern is that at this point, the information won't flow at all. So I'll leave it with Jim and Eric to help arrange with the almost former TLU committee, and we can go from there.
We are continuing to solicit alphabet soup as to what we call our new committee. So if anyone pass that on to Eric, and we can come up with a decent name. Facilities Committee did not meet. Climate Action.
Mr. Chair, one comment on facilities. I just wanted to bring to the general forum's attention, if they weren't already aware, and to the viewing audience per se, that a member of the COG staff, our new facility coordinator, is greatly involved in the mass vaccination efforts in the region. And it's a tribute to the COG staff and Lou Brungard to be involved in that very important tasking. Thank you.
Good. Keep us safe, Lou. Climate Action Sustainability, Betsy, there you are.
Yes, the only thing I will correct in or amend in what is written in the agenda is that I will say that Rob Cooper was the person from Penn State who was welcomed onto the committee as a non-voting member. We welcomed somebody from the State College Area School District onto the committee, but it was brought to our attention that the process that was used to invite that person was not as in compliance with the SCASD policy. So we are revisiting that. And my belief is that we will invite Ms. Gretchen Brandt to be on the committee with us. And I don't have to say it's already in there, but I do want to emphasize that on April 13th, there's going to be the community forum on climate impacts. It'll be for the public. So I'll put it on your calendars. You're also part of the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betsy. Let's see where we are. I think that's committee reports. We have 4 more pages of matters of record, and I hope you all have read that because I'm not going to go through item by item. So if anyone has a question about any of those. Not hearing any, let's flip to the back page, and then number 15. That's a very important word. Anyone want to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Danny.